They said Clearwater Heights was paradise in the hills. Tree-lined streets, pristine sidewalks, and perfectly symmetrical mailboxes, each one a silent reminder that appearances mattered more here than anything else. But beneath the manicured lawns and sandstone driveways, something else lived. Something controlling. Something relentless. My name is Derek Langston. For 20 years, I built other people's dreams, skyscrapers that pierced the clouds and hillside villas that whispered luxury. I was a structural engineer by trade, a problem solver by nature. But nothing in my career, no foundation crack or zoning dispute, prepared me for a force more immovable than reinforced concrete. Karen Blackwell. She introduced herself 3 days after I moved in. I still remember the sound of the double chime on my new door, a sharp, impatient tone that would come to haunt me. There she stood, tall, polished, and terrifyingly composed. A white silk pantsuit hugged her figure, a string of ivory pearls danced on her collarbone, and her honey blonde bob didn't move an inch in the breeze. It might have been a wig, or maybe it was shellacked in place with enough hairspray to withstand a hurricane. "Welcome to Clearwater Heights," she said, lips curved into a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "I'm Karen Blackwell, president of our Homeowners Association. I just wanted to personally greet you." She extended a leather-bound binder, thick and gleaming gold. On its cover, Clearwater Heights Community Codebook. 79 pages. Heavy, like a loaded gun. "I suggest you begin with chapters 5 and 8. That's where most newcomers slip up," she added, before turning briskly on her heels and striding away without waiting for a reply. Inside, as I unpacked boxes and tried to locate the breaker that controlled my erratic garage lights, I flipped open the binder. What I found wasn't just a rulebook, it was an obsession printed in 12-point Times New Roman. 12 shades of beige for exterior walls. Only 4 authorized lawn ornaments, including wind chimes, but only silent ones. Trash bins could only be visible for a 12-hour window on collection day, and any deviation could result in a fine. I decided right then that I would follow every rule. Not because I feared Karen, but because I knew the power of structure, and I wanted to see how far her control would bend under the weight of someone who played by the book better than she did. I painted my front door sandstone drift, a shade approved only for houses on east-facing lots. I trimmed my lawn to exactly 3.5 inches. I ordered a matte black mailbox from the exact manufacturer listed in the HOA appendix. For 6 months, I was invisible, untouchable. Karen passed by in her forest green Mercedes G-Class, clipboard always in hand, issuing violation slips like parking tickets in Manhattan. But she never stopped at my driveway. I took quiet satisfaction in that. Then I made a mistake. I wanted privacy. You see, my corner lot bordered a busy collector road, and the noise was constant. So, I planted a row of bamboo hedges, Philosticus aurea, golden bamboo, non-invasive and specifically listed in the codebook appendix as permissible for natural screening. I hired a landscaping crew from the HOA's approved vendor list. The hedges were placed 15 feet back from the curb, stood 5 feet, 10 inches tall, and didn't obstruct any sightlines. I even photographed everything and submitted a courtesy notice to the HOA inbox. I was proud. Maybe too proud. 3 weeks later, I came home to disaster. The hedges had been butchered, cut down to knee height. Trunks splintered, soil ripped open, roots mangled. And standing beside the wreckage was Karen, arms folded, flanked by 2 landscapers holding gas trimmers like executioners. "You were in violation," she said, gesturing with her clipboard. "Sightline obstruction. Code 4.7b. I had to act for community safety. "I never received a notice," I said, my voice tight. "It was emailed last week. The board voted on emergency action." I looked past her at the corner of my lawn, where a tiny orange flag had appeared out of nowhere, marking the so-called sightline zone. The day before, it hadn't existed. This was calculated. Malicious. I kept calm. 20 years of city contracts and nightmare clients had taught me how to swallow rage and digest it into action. That night, I reread the codebook and found a loophole. Natural hedges had height restrictions, but structural privacy elements, walls, had a different set of rules. I could build up to 6 feet, using HOA-approved stone or brick, provided I submitted an architectural application and complied with local permits. So I did. Blueprints, material specs, digital renders, a certified letter with return receipt to the HOA office. By law, they had 14 days to respond, or it would be automatically approved. 15 days passed. No response. No denial. No approval. I rented a compact excavator and broke ground the next morning. Karen showed up before I'd even finished the trench. Tires screeching, heels stabbing into my lawn, voice sharp enough to shatter glass. "You can't do this." "Yes, I can," I replied calmly. "You missed your window." I showed her the stamped application, the certified mail receipt with her signature. Her lips thinned. Her tan face flushed red. "This is outrageous." "No, Karen. This is compliance." That wall was more than stone and mortar. It was my rebellion, silent, legal, and immovable. But Karen wasn't done. Not even close. Building a wall in Clearwater Heights was like firing a shot across the bow of an empire, and Karen Blackwell wasn't the type to let rebellion go unanswered. By the time the second layer of stone was set, her response arrived in the form of a bright yellow violation notice taped to my front door. Unapproved construction materials stored in public view. Remove within 24 hours or face a $50 daily fine. I read it, folded it neatly, and smiled. The codebook, her sacred codebook, contained an exception. Active construction projects were allowed a 7-day grace period for material storage, provided they maintained safe and clean conditions. I had 4 days left, but I didn't want to play defense. So I rented a storage pod, industrial grade, rolled it into my driveway, and parked it 17 feet from the curb, 1 foot beyond the minimum setback. Every stone, every trowel, every bag of mortar was sealed inside that pod by nightfall. The next morning, Karen strutted up the sidewalk, ticket pad in hand, looking for blood. Instead, she found compliance. I watched her from the window as she circled the pod, lips pursed, tapping the plastic sides like she could will a violation into existence. Nothing. That was the moment I realized something. This wasn't about rules anymore. This was about control. About image. About Karen being the undisputed queen of her suburban kingdom, and me? I had just built a fortress on her turf. She went silent for 3 days. Then came the county inspector. He arrived in a white pickup, friendly but firm, clipboard tucked under one arm. "We received an anonymous report about unpermitted construction at this address," he said. "Karen." Of course. I welcomed him in, offered coffee, showed him every document, permit numbers, plan approvals, even photographs with timestamps. He inspected the wall, ran a level across the base, and raised his eyebrows. "This is good work," he said. "Better than most of what I see around here. You're well above code." Before he left, I mentioned casually how my hedges had been removed by HOA contractors without formal notice. His expression changed. "You're not the first to bring up issues with the Clearwater Heights Board," he said. "Especially that fountain at the entrance. There's been talk it never went through proper channels." I did some digging. County permit records. Construction logs. The decorative fountain, Karen's pride and joy, was built using nearly $30,000 of HOA funds. But no permits were ever filed. Not a single one. I filed a formal complaint with the county. Within 48 hours, a bright red stop work sign was planted beside Karen's fountain, and a $5,000 fine was issued to the HOA. That was the first crack in her crown. But I wasn't done. I started asking questions quietly. Former board members, ex-residents, even the landscaping crew that had cut my hedges. One name kept popping up, Bryce Landscaping LLC, a company owned by Karen's brother-in-law. They charged double the market rate. HOA invoices were mysteriously confidential. And then there was Mrs. Whitaker, the neighborhood's former treasurer. She'd resigned 2 years ago after being pushed out during a closed-door board reshuffle. Over tea and scones in her garden, she handed me a thumb drive. "It's all there," she whispered. Financial reports, missing receipts, meeting minutes that were never shared. I kept copies before they locked me out of the system. The data painted a picture of quiet corruption. Over $60,000 in unexplained maintenance fees. A quarter of HOA expenses funneled to Bryce Landscaping. Karen approving discretionary funds without full board consent. It was more than enough. I printed everything. Created a 15-page summary with timelines, documentation, and bylaw references. At the next HOA annual meeting, the one where they usually approved budgets and nodded through Karen's self-written agenda, I arrived early, dressed in a gray blazer. No anger, just resolve. I set up in the back of the clubhouse and handed every resident an envelope. Inside, my report. Title: "The rules are for you, not for her." By the time Karen arrived, nearly 100 homeowners were reading. Her smile faltered. She tried to power through the agenda, but the silence in the room was suffocating. Then, Mrs. Whitaker stood up. "I move for a vote of no confidence in President Blackwell," she said calmly. on grounds of financial impropriety, procedural violations, and abuse of power. Everything is documented in your hands. Karen's face turned to stone. Someone shouted, seconded. Another, third. A chorus followed. The bylaws were clear. If more than 10% of the members seconded the motion, it superseded the agenda. Karen tried to stop it. She shouted. She threatened. She called it a witch hunt. But the votes were counted. Of the 96 residents present, 91 voted to remove her. 3 abstained. 2 voted to keep her Karen and her next-door loyalist. She was done. Her gavel clattered as the vice president, a quiet ex-principal named Harold Jensen, stepped forward. My first act, he said, is to launch a full audit of HOA finances and suspend all pending violations until proper review. Karen sat in her chair. Pale, small, forgotten. But the true ending came later that night. I was admiring my wall, strong, symmetrical, and yes, completely within code, when I heard footsteps. Karen, hair frazzled, heels uneven on the pavement. You engineered this, she spat. This was your plan all along. I shook my head. No, Karen. You did this to yourself. I just followed the rules. Your rules. You'll regret this, she hissed. No one humiliates me and gets away with it. From behind us, a voice cut through the tension. We'll see about that. It was Harold. With him stood Mrs. Whitaker. In her hands, printed bank records. Highlighted transfers. A paper trail Karen had tried to bury. We need you to explain why $20,000 of HOA funds were wired to your personal account last month, Harold said. And why your brother-in-law has been overbilling us for 3 years. Karen didn't speak. Couldn't. For the first time, she was truly speechless. And Clearwater Heights? It had finally woken up. The weeks that followed felt like a slow earthquake rolling beneath Clearwater Heights, quiet at first, but unstoppable. Karen Blackwell had vanished from public view. Her Mercedes was no longer parked in the HOA-designated guest spot outside the clubhouse. The clipboard she once wielded like a scepter was never seen again. But the silence wasn't peaceful. It was anticipatory, like the moment before the jury foreman stands and clears his throat. The HOA Audit Committee, now chaired by Harold Jensen, dug into 3 years of financial statements. I offered them my files, my diagrams, and the data Mrs. Whitaker had preserved. What they found turned rumor into revelation. $78,432 in questionable spending. $26,000 paid to Bryce Landscaping for emergency erosion control that was never performed. $19,000 in community beautification charges, including the infamous fountain project that had never been permitted and now sat dry and crumbling behind caution tape. $6,300 spent on catered HOA planning meetings hosted at Karen's own home, meetings for which no board minutes existed. And most damning, $20,000 wired directly into Karen's personal account under the ambiguous label of consulting fees. When confronted with the evidence, she claimed clerical errors, then miscommunication, then outright slander. But the paper trail was too clear, too precise, too damning. Within a month, the HOA board voted unanimously to refer the case to the county district attorney's office for investigation. Karen's assets were frozen pending the outcome. Her brother-in-law's business license was suspended. Subpoenas were issued. And for the first time, Clearwater Heights was quiet, not from fear, but from relief. But if you think the story ends there, you don't know how far a tyrant will go when cornered. 2 weeks later, I woke to find my wall, my monument of legal rebellion, splashed with red paint. The words traitor and liar scrawled in foot-high dripping letters across the stone. A crude effigy, dressed in a suit and hung by the neck from a shepherd's hook in my garden, completed the grotesque scene. Neighbors gathered in the early morning light, gasping, whispering, shaking their heads. One of them, an older man named Ben who used to be on the architectural committee, stood beside me. "We all know who did this," he muttered. "But now you've got the neighborhood watching your back." Security cameras caught the vandal, Karen herself, dressed in a hoodie and gloves, face barely visible but unmistakable in her gait. The footage was turned over to authorities. Harassment charges were added to her growing list of offenses. But despite everything, the vandalism, the court proceedings, the quiet stares from some loyalists who hadn't yet accepted the shift in power, I didn't retaliate. I didn't throw stones back. Instead, I painted over the graffiti, planted fresh ivy along the base, and kept building. Not walls, this time. Bridges. The new HOA board, under Harold's interim leadership, invited me to assist with a complete rewrite of the community guidelines, something fair, transparent, and humane. I declined a permanent role, but offered to help structure the new bylaws. I even built a small online portal where residents could suggest changes anonymously. Gone were the rules about silent wind chimes and specific mailbox vendors. In came policies about accessibility, sustainability, and mental wellness. No longer treating the neighborhood as a kingdom of conformity, but as a place where individuality could breathe within reason. And then something happened that stunned me. A thank you letter. From Karen's own daughter, who lived in another state. A quiet, handwritten note that arrived in a pale blue envelope without return address. Mr. Langston, I don't know if this means anything, but I wanted to say thank you. My mother wasn't always like this. She changed after my father died. Grief became control, and fear became obsession. I couldn't reach her. But now, maybe, she'll find herself again. What you did was hard, but it was right. I sat on my porch for a long time after reading it, staring at the wall. Spring was coming. The flowering vines were already beginning to stretch upward, gripping the stone with tiny green fingers. Beneath them, new life took root. Clearwater Heights was healing. Slowly, unevenly, but healing. And me? I didn't become a rebel. I became something more dangerous to tyranny. A citizen who knew the rules and refused to be ruled by fear. 12 months later, Clearwater Heights looked the same, but everything had changed. Karen Blackwell was no longer just a local scandal. Her name had become a cautionary tale across the state of California. What began as a suburban uprising over a wall and some hedges had grown into a legal wildfire that no HOA in the region could ignore. It started with the county prosecutor's official charges: embezzlement, fraud, criminal mischief, and harassment. Karen's trial date was set for the following spring, but the fallout began long before she ever stepped foot in a courtroom. A local news outlet caught wind of the story when someone, not me, leaked the footage of Karen vandalizing my wall. Within days, headlines read, HOA president accused of stealing $78,000, caught on camera in vandalism spree. The article spread like wildfire, picked up by regional affiliates, then a national HOA watchdog group. They requested an interview. I declined. But when they aired the segment, featuring blurred footage of my neighborhood and snippets from the leaked HOA audit, my inbox flooded with messages from strangers across the country. I thought I was the only one being bullied by my HOA. You just gave me the courage to speak out. Is there a template for that community portal you mentioned? We want to set up something similar. One message came from a state assemblywoman's office. They were drafting a bill, the Community Transparency Act, which would require all HOA boards in California to make financial records, contractor relationships, and disciplinary notices publicly accessible via a standardized digital portal. They asked for my input. And just like that, the wall that began as my personal rebellion became something else, a symbol. But not everyone saw it that way. Karen still had allies. Quiet ones. Old guard residents who preferred the rigid hierarchy she imposed. They whispered that I had set her up, that this was all revenge dressed as reform. One of them, a retired realtor named Sylvia, approached me at the community's Spring Festival, a new event introduced by the reformed HOA, now run by a balanced, rotating board. You should be ashamed, she hissed, half-whispered, beside the lemonade stand. Karen gave this place order. I took a sip of my drink and simply nodded. And now it has something better, community. She walked away, muttering. But as she left, a child ran past us, laughing, his father trailing behind with a balloon in one hand and a plate of food in the other. The child paused to admire the vine-covered wall I had built, fingers tracing the edge of a stone. Is that the famous wall, Dad? The boy asked. Yup, the father smiled. The one that changed everything. When the trial began, I didn't attend. I didn't have to. The evidence was overwhelming. 3 witnesses from the HOA board, 2 county auditors, and over 100 pages of financial discrepancies, forged signatures, and fraudulent authorizations. Karen's defense claimed stress, grief, and clerical errors. The jury took just under 3 hours to deliberate. Guilty. She received a suspended sentence, 5 years probation, mandatory restitution of the embezzled funds, and a permanent ban from serving on any HOA or nonprofit board in the state. It was justice, but not vengeance. That distinction mattered to me. The money was returned to the HOA through a bond the board had wisely taken out during the investigation. Part of it went into the community park fund. The rest? A scholarship program for local high schoolers interested in public policy, accounting, or civic engineering. One of the scholarships was named after Mrs. Whitaker, who passed quietly in her sleep just a few weeks after Karen's conviction. Her contribution to the community, to accountability, was honored in a ceremony I helped organize. I gave a short speech. Nothing grand. Just a simple truth. Power isn't about who gets the final word. It's about who listens when no one else will. And change, real, lasting change, starts with knowing when to say, enough. I still live behind that wall. The ivy has grown thicker now, curling around the edges like it was always meant to be there. Neighbors stop by often. Some bring homemade bread. Others ask for help reviewing architectural applications, even though I'm not on the board. Sometimes I help. Sometimes I just smile and direct them to the new HOA portal, live, transparent, and accountable. And sometimes, late at night, I walk the length of the wall alone. I run my hand across the stone. I remember how it all started, not with defiance, but with restraint. Not with protest, but with precision. It wasn't a revolution born of rage. It was a blueprint for how to take back control, one regulation, one line item, one stone at a time. Because sometimes, the best way to tear down a tyrant is to build something stronger right in front of them.